First of all, I would like to say that I don't know if you know, if everybody knows that there will be a second talk today about custom controls, which won't be about custom controls directly, so it's only a QA session with this guy coming over there. So feel free to join us at 3 o'clock. I think it's the same room, or is A or B? Yeah, A or B. Again, or about custom controls in JavaFX, and this will be a QA session. So that means we will really do just a very short QA in this session. And if you have any questions, you should attend the other session at 3 o'clock, because this will be focused on QA. So there will be more time to answer your questions, okay? And I will also be there, so if you have some questions now, you can make some notes and just let me know. Okay? Yeah, unfortunately, I was not aware that the screen resolution is a little bit different here than I was expected to be, so it might be that the slides are a little bit shrinked, so I hope everything is on the slides, because the presentation will be, this is mated with JavaFX. As you can see, there are some custom controls on this presentation slide already, so the clock and on the bottom the slide control. So it might happen that something happens, right? So we will see. First of all, yeah, my name is Gerrit Grunwald. I'm working for Canoe Engineering in Switzerland, and I'm mainly doing custom controls in Java Swing, HTML5, and of course JavaFX. And from these three, JavaFX is my favorite, definitely. So I'm blogging at harmoniccode.org. Yeah, it's not visible here, and my Twitter hash is hansolo_, and I will try to tweet as much as possible about JavaFX when I can. So this is the agenda for today. I will shortly go over what is a control, what is a custom control, what separates it from a standard control, then how is it built, so what are the ingredients of a custom control, and you can build custom controls in different ways. We just focus on one way, and there are other ways too. I will shortly explain what it is. Then I will show you different ways on how to visualize a custom control, because this is, for me, I love to do more graphical stuff, and that was the biggest issue, to figure out what is the best way to do what, right? Then I will show you very shortly my workflow, and just 2 slides about what is a Swing custom control and a JavaFX custom control, and where's the difference. And then this might be the interesting part, some tips and tricks, because this is the stuff I came across when I was learning how to write custom controls in JavaFX, and it might be helpful for you too. Okay, ways to create custom controls. There are different ways. You can customize an existing control, which is the easy part, right? You take a tool, or you take a text editor and edit a CSS file and apply it to a button. It's a custom button. Bam. Custom control. That's easy. Then you can do a composition of existing controls together with some other nodes, shapes, panes, whatever, and create out of this composition a custom control. It's also absolutely okay, and I would recommend this way for starting with custom controls, because it's easy and you don't have to dig deep into the API. You can really just stick things together and see what happens, which is really nice. Then you can subclass existing controls, of course, and add additional features. This is possible for some of them. You can also subclass containers and handle the layout and the behavior by yourself. But this is the way I will talk about today, how to create custom controls, because this is the, as far as I know, recommended way to create custom controls if you would like to use it in a library, for example. And usually you do not create only one control, but you have a bunch of them. So that's the reason why we choose this approach, and this is also the way the controls in the JavaFX API are designed in this scheme. So something about a control. That's a standard control, right? It's nice, it's clean, it works. But what is the difference to a custom control? Maybe this one, right? It has the same functionality, but it has some additional properties, like you can measure the temperature, or it has something on top to keep it warm. So this is also a standard control, right? It works, it's simple. And this one could be the custom control. So it's a little bit more fancy. So that means the difference here is not the difference in its behavior, but the difference is the design. So a custom control could also be something that looks different. That is also possible, the custom control, right? So that means we have different possibilities to define a custom control, but in the end it comes down to properties, design, and behavior. That separates a custom control from a standard control. And this stuff is represented by the control class, skin, and behavior class in a JavaFX control. So if we take a look at the control itself, it extends control, which you would find in the API. And this is how it looks if you create my control, for example. Right? You extend it from control, you create some property, in this case it's value, and then you see something like define style class. So this is the CSS style class that will be used to style your control. And in the next, it's here. Oh, can you see it? Yeah. And here you add this style class to the control itself. So what this means, I will come to that later. Then we have all the getters and setters and properties, of course. This is all the stuff that you would find in the control class. And down at the bottom, here you see the hint, where should the control search for the CSS styles. In this file, it's here the my control CSS file. How this works, I will explain in a couple of minutes. So then we have the style sheet, the my control CSS, which could look like this. This is just an example. And who of you are familiar with CSS? Few. Okay, that's good, because yesterday I talked to some guys that deeply into HTML5, and first thing they said, oh, that's no CSS. I said, okay, it's a little bit different. But it has a lot of stuff in common with the CSS, because it's based on the CSS spec. I think it's 2.2 or 2.0, something like that. So it's not on the 3.0 spec, but that doesn't matter. So if you are a little bit familiar with CSS, you really can do that stuff very easy. So, and this is the reason why the control class has to know where to find the CSS style. First of all, it has to know what is the CSS file, and then the style. And there was a string, which was default style, whatever, in the control class, and that's exactly this class here. And if now, how it works, I will come to that later. I'm too fast. Sorry for that. So, and because it's cascading, you can define now for .myControl, for example, another class .shape, which you can use after all to style different things in your skin. Also to this I will come later. The skin extends SKINBASE, and at the moment SKINBASE is private API. That might change, I heard of it, but at the moment it's private.
It's public now in 8.
Okay, so great. So if you get the latest JavaFX 8, which is part of JDK 8, early dev preview, right? It's out, right? So okay, then it's public now. And in the SKINBASE, it extends SKINBASE, and in the skin, it will be initialized with the control, and the skin itself will then initialize the behavior with the control. And in this skin, you find different things. I don't go to all this code, because this is more if you would like to know how it really works, you need a computer and you need this stuff, and then you have to play around with it. And if you get the slides after all, you can then take a look at the code directly. And if you now have questions, just feel free to ask at any time or in the other talk later on. But what it in principle does is you can register listeners to the properties you know, I defined a value property in my control, and here I can register a change listener to this value property, which will then be called in this method, handle control property. And here I say, okay, if it's value, then you can do something, whatever, right? In this case, just request layout. That means if the value changed, the layout will be re-layouted. So, okay, what else? It has a method getSkinable where you can get the control. And this is very important. If you create your own skin, you should always be aware of this pref width, height, min width, min height, max width, max height. Because this stuff is, if you have a standard rectangular control, everything's fine. But if the control has to have a different aspect ratio, for example, then you have to override these methods definitely and have to check. Or if the control should always be at a certain size, make sure you do something here, right? And this is the method that is similar to paint component in a swing control. This is layout children. And this will be called, if you call request layout, then it will call this method. And in this method, all the magic happens, right? So here you can draw your control. I usually call a method here, but it's also okay to put all the code in here to construct your control. This is dirty flag. It was a hint from Jonathan, thanks to that, to avoid too many layouts of the control. This is a performance hint. So that means you have to set, because all the time, it could also happen that other controls request layout of this control. And that means relay out everything. But if it's not needed because nothing changed, so why relayouting it? So that's the reason why there is dirty flag. So you can decide by yourself, right?
So the other reason why you do that is because layouts run one script calls. And if you're modifying a whole bunch of stuff on the side and updating, that's going to cause a whole bunch of layouts to happen all the time. That's really bad. So normally it's a good time just to, if all these things are changing, you just have it done once and run the layout children. So it's kind of like the opposite of what you got there. It is dirty to update your scene.
Yeah.
Rather than doing it constantly with the document.
We will see a bad example at the end of this. I tried to fix it before this talk, but I wasn't able in the short time. But because I did exactly that, I missed it. So, and you can see it then, what happens. So this is now my method that I called, right? It was draw control, and then this stuff, I just create a shape. It's a circle, and then I add the style. And this is the style that I defined in the CSS, right? You saw that .myControl.shape. And this is now exactly the style that will be applied to this shape. And it was a linear gradient, so that means in the end the circle will have a linear gradient fill. And then you have to clear the children's and add all the stuff that you would like to add to this container. So then the next step is the behavior. And the behavior class is, at the moment, it's a private API. And is it also public in the 8?
If you come to my talk this afternoon, I'll tell you how I'm getting rid of the handing class.
Okay.
I'm not Richard yet, but that's the plan.
Okay, great, good job. So at the moment, right? So at this moment, this is private API, and it's in JavaFX 2.2. If you create controls for this, you need a behavior base, and the behavior base extended from behavior base, sorry, and the behavior is responsible, you see it here, to react on something, right? If you have mouse listeners, then you can handle the event stuff here in the behavior. So you have a clean separation between all that stuff, right? You define your control with its properties in the control class, you style it and create the how to say that, the visualization happens in the skin. It takes the style from the CSS, and in the end the behavior is handled in the behavior class. That's the idea. And I think these are all mouse listeners that are in there right now. There's nothing more, unfortunately. So if you need more, you have to add them by yourself. But this stuff you see, the overrides, this is already in there. So yeah, so we have the gang of 4. We have control, skin, behavior, and CSS. And how will they be initialized? So the initialization works like this. So you have the control. The control looks up the CSS file, and it knows its default style. Then it looks up the style, the skin class here in the, this is the style class. and here's the skin, and you need the whole package information. So that means the control looks up the CSS, looks up the FX skin variable, and then it checks, okay, where is my skin? Loads the skin class, and in the skin class, it calls super and then creates a new behavior, and then it is the, in this case, custom behavior class. And that's the procedure how these 4 things will be called at initialization. This is not so important, but I thought it might be interesting to know how it works, because in the beginning, when I was coming from Swing, it takes me days to understand how it works really with the CSS, and I was not able to get it running, I don't know, for a week, and suddenly it worked, and then, oh my God, I got it. So that was the reason why I put it on the slides, because really, for me, I didn't get it really how it works in the beginning, but it's quite okay, it's easy. So spoiled for the choice, yeah, because if you create visual stuff in Swing, for example, you have paint component, and you have your API, you draw something, fine, everything's easy. In JavaFX, it's a little bit different, because you heard of all the technologies. Oh, we have CSS to style something, great. We can do it in code, great. We have XML, FXML, oh, great. So what should I choose now? What should I do? Should I mix it up? Should I use one or the other? So this was also something I have to learn, because when I came from Swing, everything was code. That's easy, you have full control. And then the guys from the JavaFX team told me, oh, you should use CSS, it's much better. So I thought, okay, CSS, but it's strings in another file, and okay. I understand that. And the difference is, in principle, is one is in the skin and the other is in the CSS. So that means the code is in the skin and the styles in the CSS. And you have different possibilities how to use this. So as an example, I would use the LED, and I don't know, I saw some people that attended yesterday the HRL session where we had this control. It's a really simple control, but it's good enough to explain some of these examples. So it exists of, I think, 4 circles. The first one is a frame, it's the background, it's a circle with a linear gradient. I explain this here because we will see the difference later on. We have the off state of the LED. It is, again, a linear gradient. It's quite dark, and it has also an inner shadow. The highlight is nearly not visible. And this is the state if it's glowing. And this is something special. And this is where I have to complain against CSS at the moment. I hope it will change in the future. Because if you would like to do 2 effects, then this is not possible in CSS on one shape. And this is something that I really need all the time. Because if you look at real stuff, then you have often an inner shadow and you have a glow or a drop shadow, and it's on the same shape. So this is not possible in CSS. In code you can chain effects, but in CSS you can only apply 1 effect per shape. There are workarounds to do that, but I would love to see that if there's something like with a background color where you can just chain them up, the effects, that would be great. And that holds me back from using only CSS. But we will come to that. If I combine these 4 shapes, then it will get to this, right? This is the off state. It's really easy. That's just 3 circles, but it looks nice. And if it's on, then it looks like this. It's just I exchange one of the shapes. And now let's do this stuff in pure CSS without nearly no code. So what should we do to do that? We have a CSS file. And first of all, this is the class. This is the LED class, and this is the skin that it's needed for that. And then I define the color. This is in principle the color of the LED in the end. It's FX color, it's red in this case. And then I define another class for the background, where I say, okay, this is the background color, this is a definition in the CSS. There's a whole website that explains all the JavaFX CSS styles and how it works, which is quite nice. They really did a good job in documentation, so it's much better than in the Swing days. So you can really find a very well documented API and also for the CSS. It's really nice, and you get great tutorials on the Oracle page, so kudos. Really nice. So if you have questions, it's really easy to find answers there. Okay, so this is the linear gradient of the frame. Then you have to define the stroke, which is also something that I don't like, because if you don't do that, the stroke is always black. And this is the same for fill. So if you define a shape and you apply some style, and you miss to apply a fill, then it's black. That was also something in the beginning that I didn't know, because I thought, okay, if I don't apply a fill to it, so it should be transparent, right? Because if it has no fill, it has no fill. But the default is black. I'm sure there's a reason for that, but you have to know that. Otherwise, you can convert your stuff, and first time you started, you wonder why some things are black or have black borders, and you have no idea why. You have to set it to transparent. And there's also something I'm not sure about, because if you have code, you can set fill to null. And that means it won't be I think it won't be touched, right? So if it's null, nothing will happen. But how to do that in CSS? There's nothing like null. So you have to always set it to some color. Transparent is in principle just a color with opacity 0. So I'm not sure if there's a difference in rendering, or if it, no? Okay. Because I asked that last year, and nobody was really sure how it's handled now. But yeah. So because you can, of course, in code you can also set a fill to transparent. So where's the difference if you set it to null or to transparent? I don't know. These are things you have to know. But that's now the interesting thing is this here. And that's really amazing. And if you are familiar with SVG, you directly see this is a SVG path. And you can just put it in as minus fx minus shape. And this is the circle that we saw for the frame. So it's completely defined in the CSS, no code for that. The same goes for the off state. And these, the background here, the background insets, these define, because you have the frame, it's like this size, and you have the inset, which is the LED off state, right? And then we will see another, which is the highlight. So, but in principle, it's the same. I said an inner shadow. We have FX effect in CSS, and that's what I mean. You can only apply one effect for this shape. So it can only have an inner shadow, but it can't glow and have an inner shadow. So, and here we have the on state, and this is a drop shadow, which represents in this case a glow, because in principle this is the same, just with the color. And this is now the FX color that I defined at the beginning, that I defined the color red. And this is now the color that is used there. And again, this is always this shape. And this is the highlight, this little one. So, and this is now the skin class that you need for this CSS file. And that's really interesting, because you just define your stack panes, and when it comes down to drawing, that's all you have to do. And that's really nice. There's really, the complete code is in the CSS file. This is just, okay, take this style and apply it to this stack pane. No circle, nothing. It's just a pane which will get the style from the CSS. And that means we define the shapes in CSS, we define the fill and the stroke in CSS, and also single effects in CSS, and it leads to this. So we have the LED, we have the frame, we have the inner part, and we have the glow. And if you take a look, if it's off, you see an inner shadow, and when it's on, you don't see it. And that's the reason you have only one effect, right? Yes?
So by using the SVG shape, does that mean the code that you showed where you're doing the circles and the layout children, you don't need that?
Sorry, I didn't get the rest.
The code in the layout children where you have these circles,
Yeah.
you don't need that?
No. This is really just, you define the stack panes on top somewhere, and then you just apply the styles to this pane, and then it will be styled with the CSS style. And in the CSS style, there was this SVG part, and that will be used to visualize it. And that's nice. So if you are familiar with CSS and coming from the website, from the web minus side, not from the web page, then this might be a good way to go. Okay, so let's see if I do the same thing, just using code instead of CSS. What would it look like? So the CSS file boils down to this. That's all I need. Because I just say, okay, take a look at this skin. And in this skin, we will find groups instead of stack panes in this case. Could be something else. I use groups. And now you see here I draw all that stuff. Now in code. Right, so what I do is, let me see. So first I define here this is the glow on, this is the thing when it glows. And I think it's not the whole code because that would be too much. And okay, yes, okay, this is just for the glowing inner circle. That's the code. I create the circle, I create a paint, which is in principle the same linear gradient that we saw in the CSS. And I set the fill, which is this one, and then I set the stroke to null. Okay? And then this is now the interesting thing which is possible in code. I define an inner shadow and I define a drop shadow. The drop shadow is in principle the glow. And the nice thing about this effect stuff in JavaFX is that you can apply input to an effect. That means you can chain effects. Take the first one, and then you define the second one and take the first one as input for the second, and so on and so on. So you can really chain up effects. And that's really nice. Because if you would like to create realistic looking things, you need these things. Because it's really rare that you only have one effect on one shape. So and that's the magic that you can do in code. That means we have shapes in code, we have fill and stroke in code, we have effect chaining in code. And that leads to this one. And you see, even if it's on, you see the inner shadow here. And that looks better. Because it has more volume somehow. Right? So that's the reason why I prefer using code because I have the full control. But I will also come to that later. It depends really on the control that you create. Sometimes it makes sense to use only code, then sometimes it makes sense to use only CSS. It really depends. There's no general rule, which makes it not very easy sometimes. Right? You can also mix it up. And that's what I also do, because I would like to use CSS, and where it's not possible, I switch back to code. And yeah, it's not very nice, but it's sometimes needed. So let us have a look how this looks then. Again, we define the skin, and then we have the color for the LED defined in the CSS file. And we've defined the background gradient for the frame, and the LED off state. So in principle, this is the same CSS file as for the pure CSS version. Right, so I don't go to all the details now. And in the skin class, now we define the shapes, right? And apply then the style. And the difference is that if you would like, you could have controls where you have to change the shape, right? Especially with JavaFX, you have effects like transitions, animations. So sometimes you would like to do something special. This is easier than to do it in code. So then it's good to have the node of, for example, the circle or whatever, the path in code, and style it with CSS. Right? So before I used just stack panes. And this makes sense if you use a path, for example. And you would like to animate certain points of this path, so that this you could only do in code and not in CSS. And there's one thing more I would like to, this line here, you should forget about this line, because I learned that this is not very good for performance. But if you do it like this, you need a way to set something in the CSS file to change the style. And I was not able to figure out how to do that. So there's no easy way to do that. And so I created just a string and set this color, which is possible. And then it will change the color of the LED. But it's not the right way to do that. Right? So I have to talk to Jonathan later on how to do that really right. Because I have no idea. And if you would like to mix it, I think this is really important to do that in code. Okay, so let's see what we do. We created the shapes in code, the fill and stroke, either in code or in CSS. We have single effects in CSS, and we have effect chaining in code. So you can really use every possibility. The problem is you mix it up. And that's something which is, for supporting it afterwards, is not so nice. Right? Because then you never know. And that's also the reason why I don't know, should I use code or CSS, but I would like to stick to one of these. Because otherwise, if you mix it, you have to, okay, this is defined in CSS, oh, this is in code. So where's the problem? So this would be the result. It looks in principle the same as the CSS only version. Right? Because we only use, we have, again, no inner shadow when it's on. But in principle, you see, and this is something that might lead to trouble when you create your own control, because you have no idea, okay, should I use code? Or should I use CSS? So the JavaFX team recommends using CSS if possible. And I can just say the same. It makes sense to use CSS. But sometimes it's also good to have code, because if you do very complex stuff, it's much easier. You have more control in code. Right? So you might think it's hard. And you might want to have it more easy. So then let me show you one possible workflow, which is mine. But this only applies for graphical stuff and not for standard controls, because standard controls, I will come to that, they are just different. If you would like to create a control like this LED, and I can show you the way how I do it. So I use a software which is called Fireworks. It's from Adobe. You can also use Illustrator. And there I create this graphics. I draw it, and here you see the layers, which is highlight, LED on, LED off, the frame. And also I can define properties and that thing in this drawing program. And the reason why I choose that, because I always got the question, why do you use Adobe? Why not Inkscape? I agree. Developers use Inkscape because they don't have Adobe products, but designers use Illustrator or Fireworks or Photoshop. And JavaFX is really good for the interaction between designers and developers. So that was for me the reason to stick to tools like this, because then I understand what designers are doing. And for me, it's much easier to draw something in a real drawing program instead of drawing with my keyboards with some numbers, which leads to terrible things sometimes. So, okay, I draw that stuff here. And with these products, you have, they have an exchange format called Fxg, which is in principle something like SVG. It's a Flash exchange graphics, I think. It's an XML format that Adobe uses to exchange graphics between their products like Illustrator, Fireworks, Photoshop, and Flex. So they do exactly the same thing. You draw something with the designers, they give the stuff to the developers, and they convert the drawing, which is in the Fxg, to a control. And I wrote the same, in principle, the same thing. I wrote a little app which is based on Groovy and on Swing, and that imports the XML data, and then you can convert it to a Java 2D control, a JavaFX control, HTML5 canvas, and also FXML. Therefore, I used the FXML converter from Jasper Potts, but I modified it a little bit because Adobe Fireworks has a little bit different Fxg format than Illustrator. And then if you do this, you can really drag the Fxg file to the converter. Then it shows you a preview, which is Swing in this case. And then you can press Convert. You can define your package down here. And then the result is this. It really creates a complete JavaFX2 control. So you get a control class, which is LED. You get the behavior class, the skin class. It will create a CSS, and it will create a builder class for that control, which is something I really could recommend. To keep the user experience or the developer experience the same, you should always learn from the masters, right? And this is, in this case, this is the JavaFX team, and they create builders for all that stuff. And if you're getting used to it, then I just ask you to do builders for your controls too, because then it's really easy for the developer, because he's, oh, it's just another control. And you might think, dot, oh, there's a builder. Oh, that's great, right? So then you can really do the same things that you can do with standard controls. So create builders, right? So my tool will do all that because I was really, it was not so nice to type all that things. So now it's really easy to create a standard control. This LED, it takes me 2 minutes, and then I have the basic thing running, and then I can just work on the logic. If you're interested in this FXG converter, here's the result. This is now a JavaFX control. Then you can just drop me a mail, or it's open source, and it's also available over my blog, so you can, there's a web start version. But I think the most of the times you have the problem that you don't have FXG files, right? So. Okay, swing controls compared to JavaFX controls. That might be interesting because many people coming from the swing world and would like to learn something about JavaFX, and this is different. So a swing control uses a graphics object, and I name it dead bitmaps in the end, because usually you just create something, you create it once, and you drop it on this in this paint component class, and then it's gone. Right? If you would like to change this, repaint it, create it new. And that's why I call it dead bitmaps. You often work with buffered images and that stuff. Then we have the model and the UI delegate. And we have the very nice look and feel for styling. I'm sure everybody loves it. And we have simple properties with getters and setters. Okay, everybody know that. And JavaFX, we have the scene graph, which is really, really nice because you have live access to the nodes. You create them once, you lay out them once, and then you can really access the stuff and change it. So this is really living nodes. It's not dead. So if you create a shape, you can react on this shape, and you don't have to recreate it all the time. So that's really nice. Then there's a separation between control, skin, and behavior. We have a CSS for styling, and we have this as enhanced properties with getters, setters, and the property method. And this is really, I don't know, did somebody already create some JavaFX controls in the audience? Yeah, some of these guys did some few controls. Okay. Yeah, you should really do that. It's so much fun, I just can't tell you. Because in the beginning, when I saw it last year with the properties, I thought, oh man, just another method, and that means just more typing. Instead of just get, set, that's it. Now you need another method with whatever, property name, and then at the end, again, property. But with the binding, this is awesome. You can do so much things if you use that. It's much easier than in Swing, because there you have to create all this property change listeners here and there, and that's terrible. You have to fire the events all the time. In this case, you can just bind to the properties, and that's it. And then you just attach a listener to it, and you are ready to go. So the difference is, again, in Swing you have paint component, and most of the times you use that for custom controls. In JavaFX you have layout children. In principle this is the same thing, but in layout children works a little bit different. And then the visualization is different between this dead bitmap stuff and the scene graph. You have properties with bindings. You have a strict separation between logic and UI. And then you have generified event handlers. This is something new in JavaFX, and it's a little bit different in the beginning. You have all the generics all over the place, so it's a little bit strange, but it's great because you just have one event, and then you say, okay, this is an event of action event, right? So, or this is a mouse event or a key event or whatever, so it's always a change listener. You don't have some special listeners for special events, so this is really nice. And we have the possibility of composition of layouts, which is also new, or at least it was new for me, and that's also nice. And now this is interesting. The other thing is so theoretical. This is really stuff I came across when I tried to create custom controls. So number one, use the cache. Really important. But be sure you use it in the right place. Right? So if you cache something that you change all the time, it doesn't make sense. You have to be aware of that, but use it. I really make some tests, and it makes a huge difference sometimes. And sometimes it's good and sometimes not. Like I said, if you have, for example, you have a node, and you change something in that node all the time, the size or whatever, so it doesn't make sense to cache it, right? But if you have something that you create once, and then you use it all over the place, then just cache that stuff. And then it's really faster. Internally, it will create a bitmap and use this thing. And then you can also define the cache hint. That means you have to read the documentation. There was not enough space to explain it. But these are hints that makes it easier for the JavaFX engine to handle the cached image. So, for example, if it's rotated, is it okay if I rotate the cached image, or should I recreate it then? Something like that. So this is really important. Just it's not a good idea to always set cache true, but you have to keep it in mind that it's there and you have to use it, especially if it comes to animations and that stuff. So it's really useful. Number 2, yeah, that was something that really hurts me. Effects. You know, you have all these nice effects. You have drop shadows directly there, inner shadows. You have light. So you create something like this. You create a light and then a lighting and a drop shadow. And now you would like to apply this drop shadow, let's say, to the pointer of a clock. Right? You can do it like this. You just take your shape, which should be the pointer, and set effect shadow. So it's great. You rotate the shape and you will see the shadow will rotate with the shape. And then you ask yourself, wait, I define a light. Why is the shadow now rotating? Shadow should always be in the same direction. And I tried so many things until I figured out, okay, so you have to you create another group and apply the shadow to this group, right? Instead of the shape itself. And then it works. That means if you do this, it will lead to this effect. And if you encapsulate it, you just say whatever the name is of your group, new group of this group, right, of this one. And then set the effect to the group, then it works nice. Then it's perfect. But you have to know that stuff. It's really, I was fiddling around with this with all my controls, and I had no idea where to look for. And then I was looking in the ensemble up, I think. There is the stopwatch from Jasper. And then I saw that, and I thought, damn it. There's no documentation about that, so you have to know that. Or maybe I'm too stupid to understand it. Someone knows that stuff? I think so, right? You know, if the Lost series is on TV, these characters are moving towards the screen, and they are very blurred, and then they get sharp, and then they get blurred again. So I tried that effect, just to show you what happens if you do it wrong. So this is now the first try. I have this text, and I apply a blur, and then I scale it. And what happens is the blur will scale with it. So it's just blurred. I thought, that's strange, right? So, and that's what happened if you don't do it right. So these are this kind of effects. You just think, okay, I apply this, I apply that, I make an animation, nice, should work. And then I thought, that looks terrible. If you just put it in another group, then this happens. The blur is now applied to the surrounding group, and then it works, right? The scaling of the text and the blur will always apply it on the surrounding group, and that's something that was hard to figure out how to do, because you have to know it. Maybe you need some internal knowledge, I don't know, but for me it took some time, and even today, sometimes you do something, you make an animation, and then you see, okay, but now I know how to handle that. And in the beginning, so don't give up. There will be a solution, I'm pretty sure. So number 3, what's that? Now this is something, this is my idea of using the different kinds of visualization. So if you can create a control like this one, which I created, these are only stack panes, everything here. And I style it completely with CSS. And that's nice. Perfect. It's very clean code because you just, the style is completely in the CSS file, and then in your skin method you just apply the styles to some stack panes and that's it. Perfect. But you see it's really not graphical intents, right? And that's what I understand as a standard control, like a button, a text field, something easy. Use CSS for that. It's really great to do that. And it separates really the style from your code. If you go for something that I call a living complex animated graphics, like stuff like this, it's a little bit more complicated. So you are free to use groups or pane or canvas together with the JavaFX API, which means code. Right? This stuff I usually do in code because there I have more control over it. If we have more abilities in the CSS, maybe I will go to that, but I don't like to mix it up. That's really something I hate to do. And in the end, if you have really dead, which means you create it once and then never again, complex animated stuff, use canvas. Right? The canvas node is something that is in JavaFX since 2.2, I think, yeah. And it's very, very similar to HTML5 canvas. In principle, the API is nearly the same. So because I also did some canvas stuff, I can just take code, copy it, and paste it. And really, I think the difference is in setting the strokes and the fills, because there they use the JavaFX API fills instead of the HTML5 stuff, which is good because HTML5, it's okay, but it's not the same, trust me. So it's good that they make the decision to use the JavaFX styles, fills and strokes and that stuff. And of course, the image view, which is some secret weapon. If you have images, use images. Because scaling is so easy in JavaFX, and if you are just don't use 16 by 16 pixel images and scale them to the whole screen, right? You get pixelation, but if you just have to scale it a little bit, use images. Perfect. It's fast, and it's really awesome. But Canvas gives you other possibilities like this stuff down here, for example. You can draw something, and then you use this thing, which is just one node instead of a couple of nodes. So it keeps the scene graph slim. So the fourth thing, yeah, also something I figured out too late. There are also read-only properties. And they help you having control over your API, because if you do something like that, this is a normal JavaFX property, you have the getter, and you now say, okay, I would just let the people get the values, and that's it. But I would also like to listen to that, right? So I just have this size property stuff, and you do only that. It's still possible to set the values, of course, because the property itself has always the method set and get. So now that means that helps you nothing here, not providing a setter because it's there. Instead, you should do this one, read-only double property. And this one doesn't have a set. Right? I didn't know that from the beginning, and when I poured all that stuff from Swing, I just forget it. And then I figured out, oh, okay, here we go. Read-only properties are also there. So sometimes it helps to read the API before you start coding. So number 5. Yes, this is something that is so awesome. And it's called Scenic View. And one of the creators of that tool is over there. And this is one of the best tools ever if you work with JavaFX. So you create something, for example, a control, and you test it. And you see something strange happens. How would you figure out what happened? There's nothing, right? You just can look at the code and try to figure out where it happens, and this is hard. But this tool helps you a lot. You just start your application, then you start this tool, and it hooks up to the running JavaFX application and shows you all the stuff in there. And if you change something, it will show you what changed. You can listen to events, you can filter for events, it's awesome. This is the tool to go to debug your controls, definitely. It's great. It helped me so often to fix little tiny bugs because I can't figure it out in the code, and then suddenly I saw here, oh man, there's another pane, where does it come from? And then I took a look at the code, and then I found the position, right? So it's available on, what is this, FX Extra, fxexperience.com. And it's free. And I hope it stays free, right? Yeah, it will. And it's, yeah, use this. Awesome. And another one is this. You know, if you are not familiar with CSS, like I was, it's hard to get it all right. And this tool was created by Jasper Potts. And it's also available from the same page, fxexperience.com. And here you have a CSS, a Caspian styler. That means that does work for the default controls. But most of the times you start with something like, okay, I have this application. I would like to have a different look and feel. How do I do that? Okay, I should adjust the CSS. And then you take a look and dig into the Caspian CSS file, and then you close it again, forget about it, and say, oh, it looks okay with the standard. Because the Caspian CSS, it's like this size. It's huge. And so forget about it. You can use it as a reference and see how it works. But if you really would like to change something, use this tool. Right? Use it, and you can adjust all the parameters that are available. Then you can create a style sheet out of it and apply this style sheet to your application, and bam, it looks like you would like to have it. It's much easier. So don't start fiddling around with the text editor in the Caspian file. That's really not the way to go. So I would recommend using this. It helps a lot. And even if you create a custom control where you need to know, okay, how do they do that? You can use this one. Just create the style that you need, copy the CSS and take a look at it, and then you know, okay, because you see visual what happened. And then you know this visualization is this CSS, and then you can use it for your control too, of course. And there are also other things that are really helpful here. One more. Read the source. That helps me the most. So the stuff is open source, and you can get it. It's a Mercurial repository. Just put it on your drive, and just, if you have time, take a look at it. It's so helpful to see how they do it, right? How it works. And if you have no idea, if you have a problem, just take a look at the source. It's really important to do that. Do we still have time? I'm not sure. Oh, some minutes. Okay, that's great. So you think JavaFX rocks? Yes, of course. You want to be part of the party? Yeah. Then we want you at JavaFX Trust, which is this is a side project where we collect custom controls, and this is some kind of a lab project. That means if you have something and you would like to share it, put it in there. Right? Feel free. There's nobody who says, "What's that? It's awesome," or "That's ugly." Just do it in, put it in the JavaFX Trust project, and who knows what happens. I know that some guys from the JavaFX team looking sometimes at this project. So, and even just to have some point to share that stuff, right? So it's on jfxtrust.org. We have also an ensemble app, which is stolen from the original one. It looks very, very similar, and it contains all these controls that we created. And to show you some of that stuff that we did, I just prepared some examples. It's just a few. It's this stuff that I created, these gauges and LCD controls. And to see, last year I showed that stuff in Swing, and at this point it was not possible to do all these effects, but most of them. But now the graphical stuff is there. So there's no reason to not start coding JavaFX. Right? Last year I would say, okay, still missing something, but this year it's so much better. So they really did a good job and pushed things forward. So then we have stuff like this, right? Maybe you know, somebody of you have an iPad, iOS 6 on it. Take a look at the word look. It's this clock, right? So I just copy it from design-wise. So it's really the same as on the iPad. So the stuff like that is really easy to do. It took me just, I don't know, 1-2 hours to create that. It's not hard. So I remember in times of Swing, it took you days to get it right. But with JavaFX, it's so much easier. What else do we have? Oh yeah, this is one of my favorites. I showed it also yesterday. This is just completely built from controls that are in the JFXtras project. So I don't know if there's a real application where it might be useful, but it looks like, right? So yeah, you really should start playing around with that and just try what's possible, right? This is the same clock, it just has a different design. And this stuff is, every character is one control, and this is one control, and the LED is one control, and I just put everything together to that stuff. Right, so now it changes and it's going up like a real split flap board. Okay, do I have one more? Last week I created this one, which is, this is capable for touch too. So it's coming from a touch device. I saw it on an iPad. But this was really just, it took me 1.5 hours maybe to create that. So it's really easy. You can, and without any using graphical stuff or drawing programs, it was just coding. So what I would like to say is it's not that hard, right? So, and keep coding. This is the most important thing I have to say. So any questions? So this is the thing, what I mean. This is, there I make it wrong. You see it. Sometimes it's stuttering a little bit. This is because here, for every bubble, it will use the request layout. And I just saw it shortly before the session happened. I have a new version of that, which is much better. But in this, it's the old approach. And that's the reason, and you get this, the whole thing starts to stuck up. Oh, what's that? Little bit. So yeah, I think we have just 4 minutes. Any questions, or should we do it in the other session? You can feel free to ask.
On your radio control, a suggestion, how would you summon it in an application? Like if I had a business app that starts up with a radio control, and let's say you're 3 menus in and you want to just get to it again, what kind of suggestion? A hotkey corner of the app?
Good question.
All know that above, like
yeah, I have no idea
okay.
what is the best. So it really depends also on the application, right? So maybe we can discuss that later.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Some of this control would be better to use FXML than to code with
Yeah, so to be honest, yeah, I'm now really honest. Because I'm not working for Oracle, I can say that I hate XML, so I hate FXML. Not really hate, but for me it's a machine exchange format and nothing I would like to code in. Even if there's this really nice scene builder, I have to say. I love it, but I would only use it for layouts, but never for controls. Because it's XML, right? So it's nothing for me. I need code. I don't want to hack in tag here and, oh no, this is, but I agree, of course. This is a absolutely possible and correct way to create stuff. You can use FXML, right? It's just not for me, so I'm not very familiar with it.
Gary, what software
Peter.
what software are you using for your presentation?
Oh, that's made by myself. It's just one class. It's the images I create in Keynote, and then I just wrap it in a demo class that could contain code or images, and then there's 2 image views swapping all the time. Yeah.
How do you test the resizing behavior of your controls, like preferred size and size?
Yeah. So at the moment, my controls are not auto-resizable because it depends on the control, but usually you don't want to resize your control if the container resizes. You don't want the button getting bigger just because the pane is getting bigger. So that's the reason why I use groups, which are not auto-size. If you use stack panes, for example, then you can do that. You can create stuff that resizes automatically. I just check it in these methods that I showed in the code, where I really just check, because there's a value coming in, and then I check what is it and what to do with it, and then I react on that. Yeah, I register handlers that will be called when they change pref size or pref width, pref height, something like that. Anything else? Yes.
So I did a couple of these demos where you're looking at that I produce my presentation at a smaller or larger resolution, and when they come here, they find that they can't
No, you can resize, definitely. So then they do something wrong. It's definitely possible. And this is something that, and it's fairly easy to do because you have this binding stuff. And because if you have a pane, for example, you can bind on the width and height. So that means if the pane changes, you just have to take care about that. You have to take care, okay, oh, it's changing size, so I have to resize.
Okay, so then I guess that's what it is. Designing that one different.
Yeah, I have the same problem because I thought it's a different resolution. And when I came this morning, I thought, oh, damn, it's not the one I thought. So, yeah. But this stuff, for example, it used the whole screen, right? Yeah, I did exactly that. I just use, I bind my stuff to the, it's full screen mode. In this case, it's full screen. And if it's full screen, that means the container will resize to full screen. And I just use the full screen. You see the bubbles and that stuff coming out also directly on the corner. So this is possible. That's not a problem. Anything else? Nothing? Thank you.